Joining me now, Texas Congressman, House Oversight, Budget, and Veteran Affairs Committee member Chip Roy. Congressman, good to see you this morning. There's an issue. Do you think that the Democrats will move to file suit to stop the distribution of these unemployment benefits? That seems to be legally a sticking point in terms of the president's ability to reallocate money to pay these benefits. But do you think that the Democrats get in the way of that?
Well, good morning, Dagan. I think that the Democrats are now in a pretty sticky political spot while they're trying to raise these what they call legal concerns about what the president has done with the executive orders. Now, look, I was a first assistant attorney general of Texas when we challenged President Obama's DACA orders. As a member of Congress, Article 1, I don't like having the executive branch take action unilaterally, but the president's doing that in part because this Congress is refusing to do its job. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer is stonewalling. And frankly, what the president has done here is taken unemployment insurance benefits from where they were at $0 to $400. So listening to the Democrats wailing and gnashing of teeth about the policy is pretty interesting, given how much they pretty much abuse the process in Congress to do whatever they want to do. They ignore the enumerated powers and they pass whatever laws they think is appropriate. They're just wailing because they think they're in a political box. I don't like the executive branch taking unilateral action. I think Congress should meet and we should pass a PPP bill, an extension bill to help these small businesses. You and I have talked before about the small businesses getting hammered, and we need to make sure we're helping those small businesses survive as we try to get to the other side of this pandemic. And I think that's what we should be focusing on, is doing our job to help those small businesses, the restaurants, the 2,300 restaurants I represent in Central Texas, employing 53,000 people who are still struggling.
But the PPP grants didn't really help those restaurants. I know a lot of restaurant owners who were paying their employees and couldn't really reopen. And then once the money ran out, they had to start laying people off because, again, indoor dining is still closed down here in New York City, for example. And the way the PPP was administered, it was a mess and a morass. I call them Lambo loans. You had that guy down in Florida who went out and basically stole $4 million from the federal government through PPP grants, went out and bought a Lamborghini, and the only reason he got busted is because he got in a hit-and-run accident in the Lambo and then drove off, and now he's in home detention at his mama's house. Same thing. It was some guy in Texas got busted for buying a Lamborghini with that PPP money. Doesn't the the government need to get its act together before we start allocating more money in this kind of ham-handed, haphazard way?
Well, I agree with that completely. I've been calling for an audit of the dollars that Congress has already allocated, that the executive branch should be spending. We had $1 trillion left that I think the president is looking at for some of these other efforts he's making. But look, on the PPP, let me say a couple things. One, absolutely, when there's abuses, we should go after it. This is why we shouldn't have a centralized, controlled economy. You and I agree on that completely. I'm completely opposed to that. But where I do think it matters, Dagan, and let's be real, there were 4 million loans administered. I just had a conference call this week with credit unions here. You know what the average size of their loan was, Dagan? About $40,000.
Right, it's very
Do you know
small.
what the average size of the loans are? Generally $125,000. I've talked to restaurants throughout the district who are absolutely only alive today because they were able to have some amount of dollars that they could use through the PPP loans to stay afloat because of what you just said. People aren't being able to get back in the restaurants in full, or they're only got 50% capacity. And this is the power of government at display, Dagan. This is government stepping in, state and local in particular, these mayors, these governors who step in and prohibit people from carrying on their livelihoods. Yesterday, the whole country was up in arms because the Big Ten announced they wouldn't be having football. Now, look, I'm a big football fan. College football is great. I love it. But gosh darn it, all of these small businesses getting hammered, and everybody yesterday's crying about football. But talk about the barber shop down the street or the restaurant that's a mom and pop shop that they've had their whole bit life, and they can't be open. So we got to focus on that and focus on real jobs, real people, real lives.
I sit here every day and every week, and my focus is always on those people who can't go back to work, people who are struggling to keep their businesses afloat, and frankly, all the people who put their health and lives on the line to get to work, to check out our groceries, to restock store shelves, and to treat us in hospitals. So
Thank you.
Let me get John Hilsenrath in here, because, John, what the president did, like it or not, using executive orders, he gave aid to people who are still unemployed, extra aid, and he gave aid to people who were on the job and an incentive maybe to get people back to work. So jump in here.
Well, and I think he also put Democrats in a box, because if they challenge him on this on legal grounds, then it's going to look like they're trying to get in the way of getting aid to those households. So, I think he kind of forced them back to the table on this. What I wanted to ask Congressman Roy is for his diagnosis of what's happening in Texas's the state fiscal situation. Texas came into this crisis with pretty deep rainy day reserves, but the economy has been slammed not only by the coronavirus and the shutdowns, but also the oil price decline. Right. Congressman, can you size up? We've been talking about state and local governments. What kind of shape is the Texas state government in, and does it need help? Does it need help from the federal government in the next year?
Well, I appreciate the question. I mean, Texas obviously was extremely healthy coming into this. So the fundamentals that existed 6 months ago, those fundamentals, still are deeply embedded here in Texas. But you nailed it, right? Oil and gas, while we've had not just a slowdown in this country, but a global slowdown, the demand side has been hammering Midland and a lot of our oil and gas producers in the state. And of course, that has a direct impact on our revenue stream and the overall strength and health of the economy. Now, the good news is, right, we saw those unemployment numbers. They were the lowest they've been since we've been tracking this over the last 6 months in terms of the unemployment insurance claims, I should say. And I think we're trending in the right direction. And Texas did have a rainy day fund. We do have it with the governor and, instituted a 5% across the board tightening across agencies in order to prepare for next legislative session. I think Texas will be really strong coming out of this when we get, hopefully, Lord willing, in this country, that we'll get that oil and gas demand back and start heading in the right direction. And we've got 6 more months, obviously, till the legislative session. But that's the number one thing, right, is for all of us, open our businesses up, get back in the saddle, get our economy going again for all those small businesses. And Dagen, thank you. Thank you, Dagen, for bringing up that issue about all of those people in the service industries who are going around serving folks. I get so tired of the people who are going down and they get their latte and they get on their Peloton bike and they think that they can just magically go pick up tacos when they pull up to the drive-through or the curbside service, and that there aren't people that are having to continue to work, right? And we ought to be standing up to help all those people who are showing up to work every single day and make sure that we've got their backs.
I overheard a few ladies who are work in a business that I frequent regularly, and I overheard them. They've been on the job every day during the coronavirus pandemic here in New York City, coming to work on the subway, and I overheard them talking about hazard pay. And they said, why aren't we getting a bonus? Why aren't we getting at least a little bit of a raise for putting our lives on the line or putting our health on the line for coming into work? And they said, we know you work on TV. We want to hear you say that. So here I am saying that. I want to bring up really quickly before we go that former Vice President Joe Biden is getting closer to picking a running mate. In a letter, a group of more than 100 black male leaders warned Biden that he will lose the election if he does not select a black woman. I want to bring Siraj in here on this. This is going to be the news of the day, potentially, Siraj. Is there any, it looks like it's between Senator Kamala Harris and Susan Rice, but they've kept us guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a family who think it's going to be Michelle Obama. I hardly believe that's possible, but anything can happen. I will say Republicans do really want Susan Rice to be his running mate because they could relitigate Benghazi, as she was sort of the face of the defense of the Obama administration following the 2012 Benghazi attack. Kamala Harris would be the strongest chip for Joe Biden, but I mean, if Congressman Roy thinks otherwise, I'd like to hear his thoughts on it.
Congressman, final word before we go.
Well, the most important thing, the American people just want people that are going to stand up to secure their communities, strengthen the law and order so that we can make sure that people are safe. And I think, frankly, right now, we're just playing this political game in Washington, waiting for the vice presidential stakes. So you're right, it'll be the news of the day for a few days. But we're going to be running a campaign to make sure we're going to have a strong economy and that you can go out on your streets safely again and that our monuments aren't being toppled into the waters or pulled down. The American people are tired of that, and I think that's what American people want.